Great. Well, my name's Aaron Barter. I'm the Director of Innovation and Sustainability at Waterfront Toronto. Thanks for being here on a beautiful Saturday morning. Fortunately, we have lots of natural sunlight here. Going to let my colleagues who are with me as well introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Caroline Kim, and I'm the Urban Design Project Manager for Quayside, and I'm working on the buildings.
Hi, I'm Vinaya Mani. I'm a project coordinator at Quayside. I work on the buildings as well.
Great. So as Yulia described, we're going to walk through a short presentation, and it's going to summarize a few things. We're going to speak to the urban challenge that we're talking about today is around sustainable built environments, and then we're going to walk through our evaluation results, and then we're going to spotlight a few of the solutions that came forward in the Sidewalk Labs MIDP that we were supportive of and that we were not supportive of. And then we're going to hand it back to the table facilitators for a group discussion. So to kick things off, the purpose of what we're trying to do here from a sustainability standpoint is to address this growing urban population that is happening not only here in Toronto, but around the world. And typically that is correlated with increased greenhouse gas emissions from cities. And so we are hoping to pilot technologies and solutions that can decouple those two things so that we can continue to grow in cities, but not continue to increase our greenhouse gas emissions. This is in service of our government targets, our City of Toronto target of 80% reduction by 2050, as well as our federal targets. And in doing that as well, we want to enhance the resiliency of these new neighborhoods so that they can survive and thrive in the face of climate change. We know that we are in the midst of a climate crisis, and so we need to be taking action both from mitigating the impacts and adapting to the reality that we're in. At Waterfront Toronto, we refer to this as climate positive development. And what this means is that we look to get towards net zero carbon emissions. And we're going to talk about some of the solutions that can bring us closer to that throughout the rest of the presentation. So I want to first recap the summary of what we've heard to date. This is a very quick overview, but all of these results are included on our website at quaysideto.ca. And there's a full capture of discussions like this that have happened to date. But broadly, we've heard some items that were supported by folks in the room, and then some items that there were concerns and considerations with that needed to be addressed. So first, just to walk through these briefly, we heard support for the innovations around heating and cooling of buildings within the Quayside plan. This included the use of lake water, potential trade-offs and questions about geothermal, the use of all-electric heat pump systems. We heard support for the use of building automations to enhance the sustainability of the neighborhood and get towards these energy affordability and sustainability goals. However, it must be done in a way that protects the privacy of citizens and makes it accessible for everyone. We heard an openness to public sector investments, and that includes both Waterfront Toronto as a representative of 3 levels of government, as well as governments themselves in advancing these sustainability solutions. And lastly, we heard a good conversation and support for innovations around waste management and new tools and systems that could reduce the waste that is getting sent to landfill.
And to consider, we're asked to consider the mass timber construction on questions about the potential amendments to the Ontario Building Code in order to provide tall timber buildings, with questions about the fire safety in the mass timber. Sustainability of mass timber construction, the questions about the sustainability of mass timber construction. So in general, they felt that more clarity was needed on the metrics and where the lumber is sourced. And on local food production, agriculture and community gardens should be a part of the plans and suggested the latter be located on the rooftops.
And lastly, overall, we heard a lot of feedback on digital. Now, that's not the topic here, but I want to reinforce with everyone in the room that Waterfront Toronto would require that if the project were to move forward, all solutions deployed would comply with current and future laws, legislative and regulatory requirements, as well as our digital principles and our intelligent community guidelines. And these are mechanisms that we already make use of through our contracts. we enforce green building requirements on developers, and we imagine a similar structure. So, to move forward, our evaluation results are as follows. We saw that there were 56 solutions in the proposal from Sidewalk Labs that served our objectives in sustainability, resiliency, and climate positive. Of that, there were 7 solutions that we felt we would not be supportive of, and that leaves 49 solutions that we were indeed supportive of, and there's a number of categories that we felt that those would fall into. There were 3 solutions that Waterfront Toronto felt strongly about and that we would in fact consider also making an investment in. We're going to speak more about those, but topics like Passivhaus construction. There were also a number of solutions that we would look to governments to also make investments in due to their alignment with public policy objectives. And we've seen that coming forward from plans like Transform TO and climate change action plans at the provincial and federal governments. We also know that there are some solutions that would require some discussion and potential amendments to regulatory, and so we would push and advocate for changes to support those solutions. Lastly, and I think very importantly, there are also 28, so half of the solutions in this topic that were digitally enabled. And we think that that's important to highlight for a few reasons. First is because there are benefits associated with those, and we also know that those kind of bring forward a new conversation about how they're managed. And so those are indicated in your discussion guide, and you can certainly ask us questions about any of those specifics as we enter into the discussion phase. It's important to highlight that this conclusion does not mean that we've approved moving forward with the project or a partnership with Sidewalk Labs. It does mean that we see merit in these solutions that were put forward, and we may look to include them in an innovation plan draft for Quayside. But most importantly, why we're here today is to listen to all of you and to get feedback on all of these topics to inform discussions and negotiations with Sidewalk Labs about a potential plan. And very well, we want to incorporate that feedback, and our support could change and evolve based on the feedback that we get from all of you today, as well as the feedback over the next month or so online, as well as in discussions with governments and others, including Sidewalk. So with that, we're going to move right into our solutions. And so the first one I want to highlight is Passivhaus inspired buildings. This was a proposal in Sidewalk Labs Master Innovation and Development Plan, and Waterfront Toronto feels that this is a solution that we would be supportive of and that we may consider making an investment in as well. And that's due to the fact that in Toronto, roughly half of emissions are from buildings, and we know that that's driven by the use of natural gas for heating and cooling and on hot summer days and on cold days like this. And so as a result of that, building high performance envelopes is critical to putting a neighborhood like Quayside on a path towards climate positive. There are also some really important co-benefits associated with building better insulated buildings. Indoor comfort goes up considerably because you don't have those drafts near windows, and it also results in lower energy costs for residents. And we've seen that in buildings that are been built to the Passivhaus standard. However, we also know that in Toronto we're not seeing this activity, and it's because of the harsh climate that we have. We see a lot more activity in places like Vancouver and in Germany, where it's much more temperate and easier to manage. So we think there's a really important pilot opportunity to bring that to the Toronto context. Next, to change gears around waste collection, we think that there's an opportunity, and this was a solution put forward by Sidewalk, to build pneumatic waste collection systems within a neighborhood like Quayside. So this is a system where garbage, recycling, and organic waste is taken from buildings and from public spaces using vacuum tubes underground. And this would replace the use of local bin and truck garbage collection within the neighborhood. This is a proven solution that better separates waste, so it reduces in less waste going to landfill, and that it's a solution that's been used in cities like Stockholm and Barcelona and many other systems around the world. It also makes streets safer because we no longer have garbage trucks driving around, and it kind of presents a solution that doesn't have bins and garbage lying around. So this is something that we thought we would be supportive of. We want to hear feedback from you all here today. And it also might be something that we would consider making an investment in as well.
And on mass timber, this is an example where Waterfront Toronto would like to support and advocate for government funding for buildings innovations focused around mass timber construction. Sidewalk Labs innovation for construction is based on a model which combines factory-based production and assembly of building parts and using a sustainable, locally sourced material, which is timber, and this aligns with our goals for high-performance buildings. Mass timber is a replenishable and sustainable building material that will have significant impact to reducing embodied carbons. And what embodied carbons means, if you do not know, is carbon dioxide being emitted during the production of a material. And we believe this has a positive impact in achieving high-performance buildings. So a factory-based assembly using modular building parts can result in a cleaner construction. It can reduce construction waste and transportation-related emissions. This approach to building construction has been done in mass timber buildings to date. And digital electricity and mist-based sprinkler system is an example of a solution that we would like to support and advocate for policy and regulatory reform. Buildings at Quayside is also designed to be all electric using low voltage digital electricity. Using digital electricity means that low voltage power can travel over smaller cables and along baseboards in comparison to typical conduits that have to be hidden behind walls. The system will also reduce the risk of fires and allow for faster renovation times. In addition, to reduce the digital electricity, mist-based sprinklers are also part of the innovation as they use 1/10 of the water consumption in comparison to the typical sprinklers and allow for faster and easier renovations.
We're now going to highlight an example of a solution that Waterfront Toronto did not support that came through the master plan from Sidewalk. And this is sewage heat recovery from a wastewater treatment facility, specifically, as you can see here, the Ashbridges Bay facility, which is over in the eastern side of the Portlands. Although we recognize that this is a massive source of low carbon waste heat that comes from all over the city that could offset natural gas use for heating buildings. We felt it was not appropriate for the Quayside project, and that's due to the high cost and the logistics of moving that heat from the facility to the buildings. And that being said, we recognize that there could be opportunities nearby that could fill this gap, and that could include capturing heat from sewage in nearby pumping stations or from other facilities. And this is an important point because this was not a solution that we felt we could support, but it is something that is indeed an interesting idea. So with that, I want to hand it back over to Yulia. This is a very quick snapshot, but we're going to be on hand for the rest of the session and for the rest of the day to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, great, thank you. So as I said before, we will have 20 minutes small table discussions, and then we will quickly report back. At every table you should have a facilitator that will be able to help you take notes and keep track of the discussion. If you're sitting at a table without a facilitator, I suggest that you join other tables. We have a few spots here up front at all three tables and at Christine's table over there. To help inform the discussion, I suggest that you open attachment number 1 in your discussion guide. This is attachment that summarizes the evaluation of the sustainability solutions. Again, if you have any questions, raise your hand up, keep it up, or tell your facilitator, and your facilitator will keep the hand up, and Caroline, Aaron, and Vinaya will come and join you. Thank you. I'll check back in 20. Okay, hi everyone. We are ready for a report back, just so that we all have an opportunity to listen to what everyone else in the room was sharing. I will start just to set a very quick example of what kind of information I think would be helpful to hear. And if there is something that I miss, I will look at my table, and you guys can jump in and add and correct. Just right. Okay. So we had a very good discussions, a lot of questions about flood protection and the fact that Toronto Island is being flooded all the time. So how does Waterfront Toronto think about flood protection and development, and what is the backup plan for all the digitally enabled solutions for that? We talked quite a bit about timber, the use of timber, the value of timber, why timber, and I think it speaks actually a lot to what we heard at the previous session, where there still needs to be quite a bit of education and awareness done to explain the benefits of the of timber. And the other big thing at our table is just a general advice: when you talk about solutions and benefits, also talk about potential risks. Look at the countries that are already using the solution and explain how that potentially could play out in Toronto moving forward. It's fair? Okay, now I'm gonna move here, Ilda. And we also have a camera at the back, and I know some people will be watching, so Ilda, if you could also look at the camera when you report back, that'd be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We had a very intriguing and wonderful discussion at our table. So some of the concerns that were expressed, well, first, we all believe that wood construction is a fabulous idea. But a question or a concern was raised in that, is there any potential lobbying for concrete construction? That mass timber is only one aspect, but concrete factor also needs to be considered. Another one was self-generating electricity. It needs to be in a more comprehensive platform to be more self-sustaining. Then there was a cost-benefit analysis in regards to pricing and equitability. What are the costs and the benefits in regards to in an economic perspective, and also how equitable is that for vulnerable populations in regards to some of the solutions that have been implemented. For example, in waste, the pricing is pay as you throw. Large families, how equitable is it in that if they have to pay more because they have larger families as to those that don't? So that was one thing that was raised. And there was also some innovations on concerns over sustainability of the landscape. That was another big thing. What is the solution in regards to metrics that we need to be taken into consideration, statistics on landscape, and also in public health? How is Quayside advantageous to public health? Is it improving it? What are the metrics? Thank you.
Great, thanks. Anu?
Hi, I'm Anu, and at our table, everybody was generally really excited about the different solutions proposed in terms of moving towards a climate-positive development. Someone asked, are we moving fast enough? People were excited about pneumatic tubes, waste robots, and the mass timber process. A question was brought up, would reclaimed wood be part of the mass timber process? And further, everybody was interested in learning more about the scientific data underpinning the propositions, and wanted more metrics, and wanted the public to have access to that scientific data. And then there was just a series of questions in terms of concerns, such as how will public transit offset traffic? Will the user understand the sustainability functions and interfaces available? Is this an affordable development? Is equity being used as a lens for this sustainable development? And how do the new systems affect commercial retail, and how will the retail space adjust? Thanks.
Great, thank you. Christine?
We had people who's worked on city parks and also urban planners at this table, and also someone who's been involved with waterfront planning from the very beginning. We touched on two important issues. The first one is the tall timber. So when is the building code going to come up to speed for the City of Toronto federally and also provincially, and who is going to take ownership for this building code, which level of government. It's a long-term process, but its benefit is that it will drive green sector innovation in Toronto and Canada, and it's going to be a great source of economic interest for the city. And I can quote Caroline Kim said that this is one of the better innovations, this alternative solution that's come up by Sidewalk Labs. And then the second issue we talked about is the using all of electricity. So we understand that passive housing will work hand in hand, but if it's using all electricity, it can be unpredictable, the cost of electricity. It can be cost prohibitive for some people in the wintertime, for example, when sundown's at 4:30. And the very important question we come up with, has someone done the math? Is DC solution is reducing the cost of electricity, or will it actually raise it? Anything else from the table?
Great, thank you very much. Nate?
Thank you. So at my table, we were really generally quite positive about the solutions that we're seeing in the proposal. We had some questions about wood sourcing and where timber is coming from, which we had answered, I think, pretty much to our satisfaction, trying to come from places in Ontario or not too far away. We had some thoughts about how we can educate people in the neighborhood or coming through the neighborhood about some of the solutions to make sure they can take some of those learnings home with them and maybe implement this a bit more broadly. We're also really excited about the integration of plants in the neighborhood, whether it's through rooftop gardens or an enhanced tree canopy. And one of the more interesting thoughts I think we had, which I hadn't heard before, was how can we integrate animals into the neighborhood? Is there any local wildlife that could be drawn back into the neighborhood in any way?
Great, thank you. Last but not least. Okay, mixed opinion on this.
I think at our table there are more concerns. The first one was around innovation. Innovation requires changes in policy and municipal codes. So how do we utilize that opportunity to, well, capitalize on the opportunity to, on larger scales, like maybe Canada-wide innovation. Consumption was another big one. The belief is that this may lead to an increase in a growth economy, which increases consumption, and it doesn't lead to a sustainable future. So we're talking about sustainable models on a sort of smart city sort of platform. It's only going to lead to more use of more consumption. So there's questions around that. The pneumatic waste system. So we had examples from the Environmental Alliance, that Toronto Environmental Alliance, that they use they experimented on tri-sorter systems, and it doesn't really work. It hasn't shown to work that greatly in buildings, because it's not about implementation, but also how do you get people to use it the correct way. So there's more information needs to be utilized on proof that it will work. So, and then also incentivizing businesses to create less waste. So rather than putting the reliance on the consumer to properly recycle or lower their waste, but actually the businesses that are going to be there, they should pay some of that burden. And then I think something that we really talked about, like as a group, was on the social infrastructure, the livability. So there should be some kind of, if you're going to live there, then there should be some kind of like cost, or not, that's a bad term, but you should live there because you want to make a difference. So you don't want to get stuck in this pilot loop where like we pilot a project and you go there because you think it's gonna be an amazing thing, and then it kind of gets like shoved aside, and then you move on to another project. So you want to have like feedback in the community to know like what are we doing correctly, what do we need to improve on, and then continue to grow going forward.
Okay. Great. Anyone want to add anything? We have just about a minute left before we go back to the plenary. Okay, no, great. So thank you very much. We will meet you back at the plenary room for a common aggregated debrief.